A reading from Inside the Yoga Sutras, a comprehensive sourcebook from the study and practice of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, written by Reverend Jagannath Carrera. Sutra 1.23. Samadhi is attained by devotion with total dedication to God, Ishvara. Up to this point, the focus has been on practices that work directly with the modifications in the mind by redirecting or holding attention. Here we find another path to self-realization, devotion, pranidhana. Translated literally means to place or hold in front. It means giving prime importance to the dedication of our time, capabilities, and energy to God. In short, this sutra presents selfless love of God as a legitimate path to self-realization. Our minds naturally dwell on that which we love. In worldly relationships, when we love someone, we can't stop thinking about them. We look forward to seeing them, talking to them, pleasing and serving them. There is nothing we would rather do more than be with our sweetheart. It is the same with the love of God. Those who have a loving, devoted attitude toward God find that the selective focus of nirodha is easier to attain, and because loving is fun, it's more enjoyable. Regularity and enthusiasm are also more easily attained. Obviously, there are advantages that attend devotion to Ishvara. But who is Ishvara? Ishvara is derived from Ish, to rule or own, and can be thought of as the supreme ruler of creation. It is the Purusha, as experienced from within the confines of Prakriti, and perceived through the limitations of the ego. Ishvara is not separate from Purusha, the self, but it is a way of externalizing it. The externalization of the self is natural tendency. It is part of the learning process. When grappling with subtle truths, we look for symbols that help us understand the nuances of those truths. In Christianity, for example, a 3-leafed clover is used to symbolize the mystery of the Trinity, how the one God can be 3 separate personalities, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Instead of contemplating complex theological arguments that attempt to reconcile this principle, we could draw analogies with the 3 leaves on the one stem. Similarly, it is difficult to grasp surrendering to an undefinable, infinite self. Externalizing the self as Ishvara offers something for the mind to grasp onto. A one-pointed, devoted relationship with Ishvara allows reverence and affection to grow. From this, surrender follows. This sutra speaks to countless devotees who are devoted with faith, who sincerely worship, pray, and attend a church, synagogue, or temple. They do not need to learn about mantras, prakriti, buddhi, or vrichis to achieve liberation. What they are doing is sufficient. To love and be devoted to God in any form is a valid path in Raja Yoga. The catalyst for growth is the complete giving of oneself to worship, devotion, and service. One of the reasons that loving devotion is highly valued as a spiritual practice is because it is the best way to come over fear. Fear is one of the most entrenched obstacles that yoga practitioners encounter. Fear is how the ego responds when it perceives its existence as being threatened. The ego calls itself I, so its dissolution is experienced as I am dying. Whenever it is feeling vulnerable, the I reasserts itself because of the fear of extinction. Since the ego stands between the seeker and self-realization, ignorance continues. Fear can be overcome by will, but for most of us, it is more easily accomplished through love, which naturally evaporates fear. For the lover, nothing is more natural or desirable than union with the beloved. What begins as reverent devotion of the seeker to Ishvara gradually grows to a love so consuming that the fear of self-extinction is overcome. Overcoming the fear of self-extinction is daunting enough, but the dread is aggravated when we attempt to surrender to a reality without name, form, or quality. It is like leaping into a vast unknown. We have nothing familiar or inspiring on which we can pour our attention. We have to overcome a deep-seated fear when attempting to submit to an infinite cosmic principle whose face cannot be seen and who is devoid of any recognizable characteristics. On the other hand, it is much easier to imagine giving ourselves to the One who is supreme Purusha, unaffected by afflictions, actions, or fruits of actions, or by any inner impressions, who is unconditioned by time, and the teacher of the most ancient teachers, in whom there is complete manifestation of the seed of omniscience, who is changeless, who, when experienced, brings the seeker spiritual independence and complete rest. These characteristics of Ishvara are ways of describing some of the experiences seekers can expect as they move closer to realization of the self. Raja Yoga does not require choosing between the will or loving surrender. For most, it is best to exercise both capacities, though the emphasis may vary according to the individual. Experience it. Surrender is the active side of faith. Opportunities to cultivate it occur when our beliefs meet realities that differ from our conceptions or expectations. Surrender can't be forced. It is the outcome of a vision of life based on trusting that there is divine wisdom behind all events. But it is the mindset that can be cultivated through dedicating the fruits of actions to God and by the practice of acceptance. Dedication. We know from the study of non-attachment that actions motivated by self-expectations bring pain. One way of overcoming selfish expectations is to engage in actions but dedicate the fruits of those actions to God. Dedicating transforms ordinary actions into powerful spiritual practices. Acceptance. The entire creation exists to give the experiences necessary for the liberation of the Purusha. Our common experience tells us that our intents and actions cannot necessarily change the course of history, personal, familial, societal, or global. We develop acceptance every time we remind ourselves that no matter what occurs, it ultimately brings about our spiritual unfoldment. With acceptance, there is no expectations or demands placed on anything to change or to conform to our personal conception of how life should be. Acceptance is trust in Ishvara, the supreme ruler, to oversee the universe wisely. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.